Hey everybody, I'm Jody Vance.
And I'm George-affleck.
And it's time for...
Happy Valentine's Day, UnSpun.
Tweet, tweet, tweet. Little birdies around your head with little love hearts. With shout outs to your wife and my significant other. Hey, happy.
I know. What are you going to do? It's like dine out, go to dinner, or just do something at home. Again, watch Netflix.
Watch Yellowstone over again. Watch Ted Lasso over again. Watch,
we've reached the end of Netflix. Now we've moved on to other platforms.
Here we go with first world problems. But let's talk legitimate problems affecting... Well, coast to coast across Canada with regard to the opioid crisis. We are the epicenter. There's no doubt in BC. The numbers.
Yeah, terrible numbers coming out today. 1,700, I think it was, or more, a few more than that, dead in the last year across BC of opioid overdoses. Terrible. And 81% of those people were men and living in single-family homes, basically. I mean, in residence, not on the street.
Now, that's a stat that you and I have talked about prior to hitting record on our podcast here on UnSpun. And still, when you say it out loud, George, it gives me visceral reaction as a parent, as a human. Like when we talk about 1,700 plus people, every single one of those. And I have loved ones, good friends, very good friends who have lost children, adult children, to this crisis. They are broken. Every Mom Stop the Harm. I mean, you saw that.
Yeah, very powerful, presentation from that organization. It's just Leslie McBride, I think is her name, who's one of the founders of it. Basically saying governments, you got to do something. All governments, local, provincial, federal, this has been going on. When I was on council, the data was very similar. I mean, we get a lot of attention, and what Sarah Blythe does down on the downtown east side, dealing with this opioid overdoses down there. Every day there's overdoses. She's down there with her team saving lives every day. Meanwhile, and this was the data when I was on council, was a majority then and still today are people dying in the basement suites of their family homes. Because they're quite often construction workers, they're laborers who have injured themselves, who became addicted to painkillers. Painkillers were cut off. They moved on to street drugs because they still were in pain and still had to go to work. There's a big chunk of those people, these men who are just and they're afraid to admit they're addicted. They are in this cycle of addiction. They can't get help. They don't know where to ask for help.
In pain, often excruciating. Constant pain.
Yeah.
How do we start? Yeah. How do we start to even? You said the stats were very similar for when you were in council in terms of the demographic that we're looking at here, the issue at play here. For those who are informed on that, how is it that we're still standing here, frozen in time, incapable of taking a step? Like, what is the first logical step? I mean, there is now discussion about there being no criminal charge for small possession of illicit drugs, like beyond that of what we've gotten to. Like the world didn't end when pot was legalized and then recreational use was not just allowed; it was just decriminalized across the board. Are we inching ever closer to helping those who are already in this vicious cycle? Sure, maybe. But what about the people that are flooding through? Because those injuries are still happening on work sites, and the treatments are not available. They're costly. The coverage isn't there. Like, what can we do, George?
I know. And we have a thing called WorkSafe BC, which is an organization built an insurance company, really, Crown Corporation, that is meant to deal with people who are injured at work and you pay into this program as an employer. There seems to be an unwillingness, I guess, or perhaps these guys are unwilling to actually talk about it, to receive the funding, or the employers. There's something broke. They have a billion. They have a lot of money. WorkSafe, a lot of money set aside that they've saved over the years. It's an insurance company, so you have to save money to pay out. But at what point are you holding in too much money and not giving it back to the people who need it most, which are the people who get injured at work? And I think that this is not all of the people that are dying of opioid, but it's a big chunk of these these people. And I think it goes, and there's also this, the argument about welfare rates and about, having a basic living income that you see that argument happening nationally now, and you see it in the States, you're seeing this. How do we as a society start going, you know what, we have to find ways to provide income to people so that they don't feel like they have to do, sell drugs or
Desperate
buy drugs
things
because they're injured.
Right.
Or are homeless, or can't find a home at all. That they can't even, the rent subsidies are not there, or there's so many things broken, as we know. The 4 pillars, all those things is not happening. We talk about homelessness, we talk about healthcare and mental health care and all of these things, and yet nothing seems to be happening. And we've talked about this before. We go, look what happened with this pandemic that we're in, over the past year, where. What's the number? How many people have died in BC of COVID?
I don't know what the total number is.
It's almost the same number. It's like
it's about the same. It's maybe just a little bit higher.
So here we are, shutting down our economy, spending billions of dollars, and I'm not saying we shouldn't be doing that because of the crisis, but all provinces and cities and the country came together. All countries around the world came together. Yeah. We've talked about this before, but they're not doing it for the opioid crisis. They're not doing it for homelessness. They're not doing it for mental health crisis. They're not. You have right now the Bell program. There's a CMHA programs. There's these programs that are trying to get funding to pay for mental health care because there's not enough money coming from the government for mental health care. We have institutions that were shut down. I mean, it's just there doesn't seem to be any government, and that was kind of the point of the speaker from the Moms. What's it? Moms
Stop the Harm. Yeah,
Moms Stop the Harm was kind of her point. She said enough. She actually said. I'm not going to go as far as to say I'm going to go. They're going to kind of rebel. They're going to kind of go. You know what? Because she was saying nobody's changing the way. No government is changing the way they're doing anything. And we've now had these kinds of terrible numbers for opioid deaths for at least 5 years now.
At least,
and yet. And nothing is changing. And we know that this is bad drugs coming in. Is legalization the answer? That might be part of it.
Maybe.
I think it's more complicated than that. I think it's about taking care of these people.
Okay, so this is the point in the conversation where I appreciate you setting the table, laying it all out as you just did. But when we get to is legalization the answer? Maybe, but then there's this and this and this and this. And we often get so busy tumbling down that hill of all the other things that can't be done in rapid succession with a tainted drug supply that's exponentially more damaging in a pandemic because there's not the amount of drugs coming across the border that there was before. And the dealers are like, we're going to cut it with more fentanyl, higher addiction rate. We don't care if our addicted die because there's always going to be a market for that. Like how do we stop the deaths right now? Well, it's not a letter writing campaign to somebody though, George. It's not, managing up, and it's not like, we should really do something about this. Like at all levels of government right now, all across all party lines, this is a devastating failure. And I think what you were saying before about COVID-19, how it revealed that we do actually have the ability to put supports in place in an urgent fashion for a vulnerable segment of society, and why it was possible to do that so quickly across the country with things like the CERB or the wage subsidy or, rent relief or small business, which was not as great as it could have been.
And in the case of homelessness and drug addiction, you don't have to shut the economy down to do it. I mean, we not only came to the table to help people to deal with this crisis that we're in, this fentanyl or the pandemic that we're in. We also shut down our economy, so it's a double whammy. And in order to solve homelessness, and it all comes back to it's like. And look at all the time that's being spent now trying to figure out how this pandemic started. They're in China. They're trying to figure out where it happened. All this energy going into how did it start? Hey, guess what? How did homelessness become a problem? How did opioid, drug addiction become a problem? Why are there so many people with mental health care problems? What is going on? Let's start and look at the bottom and sort of work our way up and say, look, we need to figure this out and politically, it's a tough one because you're talking about a generational change, and no politician, and I've said this before, most politicians aren't willing to make something they're never going to get credit for. 20 years down the road. That guy who made that decision, that team, that
this leads right into your column. This leads right into your column that you wrote about the legacy of the mayor of Vancouver and how that's going to be the inaction, at least to this point, where Strathcona, the encampment is concerned.
Yeah, my column in Vancouver's Awesome was touched on two areas. One was the fact that, because of course I get a lot of pressure when you bring up Strathcona, and I'm an ex-politician, the automatic, well, what would you do, right? And so let me just describe, first of all, my point was in the column was that Kennedy-Stewart is going to wear this if they don't have a solution, and will there be another one that will pop up when the province, as they promised, will move along this and close down Strathcona and get these people homes and all that stuff. But another one's going to pop up because it's the same people in charge in Vancouver. Park Board allows it. Council seems to be willing to accept it. So there's going to be another park with homeless people, a tent city in it before the next election. So Kennedy-Stewart, as the face of the city, will have to wear that. And that's one part of my column. Yeah. Dealing with the other side of why is this happening and what would you do, George? Well, I have said many, many times, there was a system in place that we had that the Park Board intentionally shut down, which was, in the case of Strathcona specifically, engineering staff whose offices and facilities are quite close to there, right by the train tracks there, were tasked with that park and a few other parks where their job was to go in every day, and if there were tents, they would move along those tents. They would say, okay, you can't keep your tent here. Let's, one or two tents pop up. You got to just sort of, guys, like, do you need help? Very kindly, compassionately. Right. What can we do to help? Do you need assistance? Can we take you to the proper place? Here are all the things you can get. They did that very successfully for 50 years, more than that, and so the Park Board and Council and the Mayor's office intentionally have said to the engineering department and, of course, Park Board staff, the 15, whatever it is, park rangers that for 200 plus parks have said, no, let them put up their tents, leave them be. And so you have the ability now to create these tent cities, which create, yes, there's a homeless problem. Yes, there's a housing problem. Yes, there's a drug addiction problem. Yes, there are mental health care problems. But guess what? There also is in these parks, in these tent cities, a lot of crime.
A lot of crime. Yes,
we're seeing that becoming more. Can
I share this just in case if you're listening, as you always do, to UnSpun podcast here with at George _affleck at Jody Vance on Twitter. I picked this one up actually off of Bob Cronbauer's Twitter. He posted this. The Vancouver Police Department is investigating a stolen vehicle that was actually found in Strathcona Park, and their release is here, and it talks about how the police have now removed a 1-ton truck from the Strathcona Park encampment that has been parked within the camp since February 3rd. It's February 11th. Okay, so interesting. A 1-ton truck. You didn't know that was the so leading to like the why. And then it's like the truck was first identified last week. Officers took a thoughtful, measured approach to develop a plan to remove it. Okay, those are some careful words.
Measured approach, like just move it.
Just go get the truck. And get the truck. Anyway, so but the tension within this. But here's the thing that I found really interesting, George, is. They said that the officers were on scene around 6:30 a.m. A tow truck was used to remove the truck without incident. It was taken to the VPD property office for further investigation, going on to say, quote, no issues arose and no arrests were made during the extraction of the truck, this constable says. There were few residents in the park when the truck was removed.
Where's few? Like, is it not many?
Where's everybody at 6:30 in the morning? I thought everybody needed the tents to live in. Like, this reminded me of you telling me about Oppenheimer Park when they did like the heat camera at night. CBC did that, right? So, and then looked down and found that there were like 2 tents that had occupants in or whatever.
Yeah, what was weird about that story was they talked more about the rats than the fact there were no people. It was like they buried the lead. But basically what they identified by this heat camera that they put on a drone was that there was nobody there. Nobody there. Like literally 3 or 4 people in Oppenheimer Park at 3 in the morning or 4 in the morning. Again, I'm not asking for people to start attacking me and saying there's not a homeless problem. 100%.
Oh no, there's a homeless problem. But it's the element of what this camp is all about.
and our tent city is the solution. I don't think so. And I don't think they are creating a positive thing for anybody. I don't think there are many homeless people who would want to be in Oppenheimer or in Strathcona right now. It's too dangerous. The police are clearly, based on that story about removing a stolen vehicle, are afraid. Look what happened when they were trying to apprehend the alleged murderer of a woman. They couldn't even get to him. This is out of control. And, the issue, it's just, it's clear from the courts, the last three decisions, and I pointed this out in my column, the last three decisions by the judge for 2 times for Oppenheimer and 1 time for Crab Park was that these places are dangerous. You as a government in the municipal government have the ability to go in and do this. You do not need
the responsibility, not just the ability, George, the responsibility to do it, which I liked about your column.
Yeah, you don't need to ask for an injunction to do your job. Yeah. Just go do your job. And they have been for generations before this new park board and council came along. And now we sit here and we're talking about building, small little houses in vacant land, which could be an interesting solution. And if it's a, controlled environment, all that kind of stuff, I don't know. But right now we're dealing with a park full of tents that has massive, major criminal behavior, alleged murderers being harbored there. This is out of control. So the mayor is going to wear this. I think it will be his undoing. When you run for office, you think, am I going to leave on a down where people are going to love me when I leave, or are they going to hate me? Right now there's a lot of goodwill on the mayor's plate for him to win the next time. But of course, anything can happen.
Yeah, anything. But when you're talking about the mayor, I was just pulling up, I'm looking down here and I'm pulling up the Twitter profile of Kennedy-Stewart, because this morning we were alerted that there would be the press conference that he often has on a Thursday, right? Sometimes not. Sometimes it's a photo op. We're not really sure. Sometimes it's at 10. Sometimes it's at noon. Sometimes it's at 12:30. Sometimes he tells you to come right here on my Twitter feed to watch it live, and you go there and there's no feed for it. I spent way too much of my day today trying to find the mayor. I can't get him on the phone. I can't interview him. When I do, it's like I can only do 3 minutes and 30 seconds. And it's just, I don't know. I want more from my mayor. I want more bite and less profile. Is that too much to ask? I'm done with looking at pictures of Kennedy-Stewart. Isn't this sweet tart for Valentine's Day in the West End so cute? You know what? Are you kidding me right now?
We had Rebecca Bly, I think, and Pete Fry went down to Strathcona after that murder, alleged murderer was apprehended, and spoke about the challenges then. But they were then started feeling somewhat concerned about their own safety, and staff and police asked them to get the heck out of there. This is but the mayor was nowhere to be found at that moment with that arrest. He sent out a press release, but he did not do any kind of, as far as I know, any kind of presser. And I thought that was curious. And I feel like, he tries to hold these press conferences where he's trying to control the agenda. Quite often they're surprise press conferences. More often than not, surprise to staff who are going, what? Remember when he announced that the city was going to be bankrupt? Yeah. And staff are like, that's not how it works.
No. I remember, though, when he announced that the Jericho lands youth hostel and it's Jericho. Yeah, Jericho Youth Hostel, as well as the motel on Kingsway, the Motel 2400 or Motel 1200, I can't remember what it's called, were going to be used for these people. And we're almost 20 minutes into the podcast and we haven't even got off our first topic, really. But it's incredibly, but it's incredibly frustrating to look at the struggles of those impoverished, desperate people who just need a helping hand from our elected officials. And now we're facing down, you may be watching this or listening to this podcast right now, in a snowstorm in Vancouver. Very rare occurrence, but can you imagine having to live on the streets of Vancouver in -12? No, I can't. Where's the call to action? We're all seeing the same weather report. I don't see any sense of urgency with saving these people. Are mid-pandemic crisis. There are people living on the streets right now who just a heartbeat ago were rent-paying working citizens who lost their job, were living paycheck to paycheck, and were 2 weeks away from living on the street. Boom, now they're on the street in a snowstorm, likely with their children. there's so much to this that is just, it feels like it should be more urgent than it is.
Well, and I think we can also point to the federal government, its inaction on housing
Totally.
for now 20 years, really 30 years, since the early 90s, when the federal Liberals at that time under Christian cut the housing program. And you have the snowball, pardon the pun given the weather, but where when you stop a program and don't replace it with a program, the problem becomes worse and worse and worse. And so the same thing happened with the closing of the mental health institutions in the around the same time. Yeah. We're talking 30 years ago. So we're talking a generation now. And here we are facing a pandemic in the middle of a homeless crisis, in the middle of a drug addiction and opioid crisis. It's like, what else can go wrong?
What can we do as a society, right? Like, I'm constantly like digging through my closets. Here's more blankets for blanketbc.org. Here are more shoes and tarps and things that I can take down to the Overdose Prevention Society. You mentioned Sarah Blythe, who's constantly down there saving lives with her team, volunteers on the front line, trying to make a difference. Mm-hmm. Mark Brand, we see Jeremy Hunka at the Union Gospel Mission. There are some Covenant House, unbelievable people doing unbelievable things. And yet I feel, and you and I have talked about it before, like when we're donating a bunch of stuff, is that helping or hurting the cycle? Like, how do we?
I mean, it's an interesting dilemma, and you hear this from staff at the city, and they're cleaning up the alleys all the time. Every night they get there's a power washing program and like a water, like they cleaning out. There's most of the stuff they're pulling out of these alleys are clothing that's being disposed of, because these people are getting new clothing, these homeless people, which is great, but it also shows you that their clothes are probably wet, that they have no place to they don't have a bedroom and a bathroom to go into, and so they're just dumping their old clothes on a pile and then moving on. And it's a big, it's a challenge for the city to keep on top of this problem with all the cleaning up in the alleys and all that stuff. And the fact that it's a statement to the problem, that we give them as much clothes as they want, but it doesn't put a roof over their head and get them off their drugs and give them the mental health care they need. So, again, it's the 4 pillars, right? All those things have to happen simultaneously. And if they don't, you have a broken system, and that's where we are. We have a broken system, and
that is burning money. It's burning hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars over decades of just being like, there's just money being shoveled into the problem instead of somebody doing that. What do we say almost weekly now? That line by line prioritized budget. Where are these dollars going, and where may they better be spent in order to create some pillar-based environments that can start to move this meter? Because you can't fix it all in one fell swoop. If we could, it would have been done by now, yeah? Naive to think we could just like fix the downtown east side or fix the opioid crisis that's happening, as you've mentioned, mostly in moms' basements by mostly, 81%? Men between the ages of 18 and 49. It's, these crises are real.
I know it's depressing, and in the middle of a crisis, like we need anything more to make us sad. But I hope one thing that this pandemic has taught us is that governments can, of all stripes, left, right, center, whatever, can work together to solve a problem. And we, within 1 year, have went from a pandemic out of nowhere into finding multiple vaccines, to now dealing with the production and administration of that, which is not going well, but it's going. It's not going as fast as we'd like.
That's the good news. Is the pause is over. I've by all accounts, it's like incoming. It's going to be up to us to see how we roll it out now, right? Like that's going to be the big challenge, is to get it into as many arms as humanly possible, as quickly as possible, with these variants of concerns coming into play. And on that line, breaking news today is Ontario making the decision to postpone March break in schools from March till April 12th. And unpopular for some people, pushing back, saying, what do you mean? But in my head, I'm like, well, why is that a problem? Did you book some travel? Because you shouldn't be traveling. right?
Well, if I was,
But wait,
15 or 16, I'd be like,
wait. Oh, you're still going to get your March break. You're still going to get it. And in Ontario, it's going to be April 12th instead of March 14th or whatever it is. So it's delayed. And if you're in Ontario, the weather's going to be exponentially better in April. That's one. Two, there might be lesser restrictions because a month later, which is actually 2 months from now, vaccine and immunity and moving about and getting outside and safe six and blah, blah, blah. You know, there's I think a lot of relevant reason for this. And, you know, here in British Columbia, to bring that news back here is John-Horgan saying, we don't want you here. Right?
it's just so counterintuitive, really. Isn't it? It's just like we live in a province that's one of its biggest things is tourism. And we're like, no, stay away.
Just for a minute, we got to just get some vaccines and arms because we are seeing progress in our long-term care homes. We are seeing some relief on the faces. I see it as an essential caregiver who was in my dad's care home last weekend. He's doing great, by the way, but you can see it in the workers there. Like there's this element of not calm, but just like this one hint of relief off the top that every day isn't going to be maybe the day that wildfire breaks loose and kills all the residents. Like that's what they've been living in. I mean, when we want to talk about it,
and it came from you. Like it's like,
hey, can I tell you?
What's
this?
What is that?
Okay, so right, so for people who are just listening, this is the COVID-19 testing kit from the Vancouver Coastal Health. What the symptoms are, if you should get tested, how you get your test results, how to self-isolate. It's a really actually impressive piece of information. It's good intel. Obviously, we've been sending people to the bcpoli.ca for more information. I found that I had to sign up for a text message to find out what a test result would be. It wasn't me. I'm not going to point out to who it was, but I will tell you it was born of a sore throat. So when Dr. Henry says, and stay home if you're sick, right? So it was like there was a sore throat in the mix and everybody just stopped and went, okay, who have we seen? Where have we been? What happens now? Because you take that person, you isolate that person, right? You use a separate bathroom. You wash your hands 1,000 times. Everybody puts a mask on no matter where you are. It kind of brought us all into action. It was inevitable that this would happen at some point. It likely will happen to every family. I hope not, because it's terrifying. But I'll tell you the piece of good news, George, is that at 8:37 in the morning, the test at the drive-through facility was administered. And at 5:37 p.m., I received the text message of the test is negative. That turnaround is impressive.
That's amazing.
That is impressive.
Like 6 months ago, it took 5 days, 6 days to find out. So you'd have to isolate and then you have to isolate. It's like, and now it's
and
like
the relief.
The same day.
Just the sense of relief that comes with a negative test. You've talked about your neighbors.
Yeah.
So there. And one more thing I want to get to before we run out of time is my column this week. Not COVID related at all, but there was so much noise and there still is discussion ongoing about news stories and reports and really social media rumors about abductions or assaults or white panel vans or a red panel van, and people sharing on social media those accounts instead of calling their local police and really getting to the root of it. So my column is about that because as you and I being similar age, you remember the white panel van.
Well, it's Clifford Olson. One kid I went to school with, she was abducted and killed. So, horrible. We were living in a weird 1970s fear, which was different than I think came afterwards. But you were, what'd you call it? Not chicken run. What do you, free range?
Free range. Yeah. Oh my gosh. My mom didn't know where I was all day long for 12 hours a day. There were no cell phones. She had no idea where I was and there was no supervision of any kind. No,
same. As long as we were home by dinner. That generally, that's
And if not, you're going to be really hungry. Anyways, read the column. And one thing that I got a note from my cousin, who is a Vancouver police constable, who is one of the unbelievable officers. She's a sergeant. I'm gonna get knocked for that. She's a sergeant. She's a way higher up now. Anyways, but she and a number of her colleagues put on free self-defense clinics for women and girls, and particularly those who might be in particularly vulnerable living situations. And she sent me the link to that. So I'll make sure that I put that up on my social media as well, because it is free and it will be resuming in person as soon as COVID-19 is over, but they are virtual now. And she's taught me a lot about not wearing a ponytail, and obviously women are just taught to be more cautious because we are more vulnerable.
I'm the dad of a daughter, and I worry about her every day now that she lives on her, outside the house. I don't have complete control anymore, like I ever did. But yeah, so good column. Read it, check it out. Check out my column. Check out the Orca.
Oh yeah, get the fin. You got to sign up for the fin. That's the big deal. Yeah,
our columns are also posted in there, and so yeah. There we go.
Yeah, your columns are posted in there. That's a good point. So you can get yours and mine and a whole array of others. If you sign up for the fin, your information is not sold in any way. You go to the orca.ca, you put your email in there, and then McLean K curates this beautiful little package every weekday for you to garner great information. And I've got to give a shout out to Rob Shaw, our newest member at the Orca, who's been doing an incredible job of writing and also presenting politics on Czech TV. Have you been watching him on there? So good.
He's got a podcast. He's got a column. He's everywhere.
I love it. Yeah. I love that too.
So that's the way it works. We both know you got to have like 8 gigs at any given time.
That's right. Get busy. Get on it. All right. That's it. That's all we got time for. Say goodbye, George.
Bye-bye.